America has lost 1/3 of our manufacturing jobs since NAFTA. We've lost 70,000 factories. Think of it, 70,000. It's like, doesn't even sound like it's possible. And I know it's right because I've said it for the last month and a half, and they never corrected me, so it has to be. Because
you gotta love when they go CNN sucks on their own. It's not like Trump led the charge. Anyway, news roundup and information overload hour. Always a privilege and a pleasure to have back Ann Coulter, author of the best-selling book In Trump We Trust. How are you, Miss Coulter?
Fantastic. How are you?
You know, you hate doing phone interviews, you tell me. Why do you hate doing phone interviews?
No, I like doing phone interviews.
Oh, I thought you always tell me you like to be in studio.
With someone else. Once again.
Well, no, because you always say when I'm in New York, I like to come in studio. You like to come in the studio and do it live.
Oh, well, if it's convenient, yeah. I think the sound quality's better. And, of course, I like chatting with you and having candy and talking to Linda.
There's all sorts of fun little experiences that you have behind the scenes. I know you were hell-bent, especially on the issue of Department of Homeland Security. Are you happy with the choice?
The good news today is the great Stephen Miller, who recently turned 30, came from Senator Sessions' office. He was very involved in Trump's helping with Trump's immigration policy paper, and he's been writing all those magnificent speeches of Trump's. He's going to be the White House policy director, so I'm already sleeping a lot better at night. I really like this guy, Rex Tillerson, and, the strange thing is, you and I were on the same side, as were most of my friends, on the Iraq War. And I'd still defend it, except for the fact I did not know that I lived in a country that would elect Barack Obama, who would then turn our victory into a defeat. But whether the anti-Iraq war people were right in saying this was doomed to failure from the beginning, or I'm right that we won, they were waving their purple fingers, it was a crucial war to wage, and then Obama came in and gave it away, I certainly wouldn't want to go and do it again. But during that whole, I really think Americans are tired of war. I think Trump really hit on something with that. And our thought is we've been suffering, middle class and working class wages have not only not gone up, but gone down in the past 30 years. And America needs a little me time. That was a big part, a big theme of Trump's campaign, and a winning theme that I completely 100% agree with. At the time, when we were supporting the Iraq War, we were accused by some of being these warmongering hawks, neoconservatives, and I was always baffled by this slander. Well, now I see that half of my party actually are.
Uh-oh, did we just lose Ann Coulter? Wow. Now, losing Coulter's like a big deal, because that's the problem. If you're in studio, you don't have a problem at all with your telephones. Anyway, we'll get her back here in just a second, but Ann, of course, was on the front lines. One of my favorite cuts when we run that montage of people, and all saying, Donald Trump can't be president. Ann Coulter in I guess June of 2015 said it on Bill Maher's show. She got laughed at, and guess what? She turned out to be right. All right, we lost you. What happened?
I think it was at your end. But in any event, I now see, and I described this in my latest New York Times bestseller, In Trump We Trust. I have a whole chapter on all of these Republicans, non-Trump Republicans, trying to be like Reagan. But it's a different world from when Reagan was president. Primarily, Reagan won the Cold War. They seem to have forgotten that. And in fact, more than that, pretty much all of the Republicans on those primary stages were champing at the bit to go to war with Russia. I don't want to live in Russia. I don't want to live in Sweden or Japan, but they aren't the Soviet Union anymore. And I've just been baffled at this idea that we must have a Secretary of State who wants to start wars all over the Middle East and with Russia. That was a division between Hillary and Donald Trump, and Trump won. We don't need to go to war. We could use a Secretary of State who, again, as I was saying at the beginning, cares about America and doing things for America, and America needs energy. So I think it's great we have this Exxon guy as Secretary of State.
I agree with you. I don't have a problem with it. I know my good friend Tony Perkins is upset because of his position with the Boy Scouts and gay Scoutmasters or some whatever thing. And I just said, well, Secretary of State's not going to have any impact on that at all, ever. That's not what the role of a Secretary of State is.
Yeah, I think that's right, though. It's always worth pointing out what PC lickspittles most of corporate America is. Yeah, they just don't want to be harassed by social justice warriors, so they go along with all of this nonsense. I will really sleep well at night if Chris Kobach ends up at Homeland Security, and I'm not at all happy about this Andrew Puzder as Secretary of Labor. He's Mr. Amnesty. He wants to replace American workers with cheap foreign labor. He's totally on record with a huge supporter of Marco Rubio's amnesty, and that's the guy who's going to be in charge of labor? I don't know, put him at EPA or something. But Democrats have their own reason for opposing him. So with any luck, he won't get through. I just don't understand why labor wouldn't be the great Peter Kirsanow, who would actually like to be at labor. He is the Civil Rights Commissioner right now, and a proud graduate of Cornell University. Surprisingly, with a name like Peter Kirsanow, he's also black. So you get your diversity points with no compromise on anything. I was reading him for years without even realizing that, or realizing that he was an illustrious graduate of my alma mater.
Do you talk to Donald Trump much?
None of your beeswax.
What do you mean none of my beeswax? What are we in third grade? Good grief!
Why do you ask?
Have you talked to him since the election? How about that?
Why do you ask?
Because I know how you are. I mean,
then you don't need to ask.
Okay, no, I know how you are in terms of when you want something done and you believe strongly in something. There's no mistaking at the end of the conversation how you feel and how strongly you feel about it. And I agree with you on immigration, and I agree with your passion, and I agree with all of the things. Look, the Trump.
The other point about immigration that I think is important, and something that I mean, for all of his virtues, that Trump at least has absolutely no experience with, and that's in the political world. On his other issues, which are very popular, or nobody else would bring them up, but they're popular when he does them: saving American jobs, reducing the price of energy, reducing regulations, repealing Obamacare. He's not going to get any pushback from Republicans on 90% of what he wants to do and things that will make America great again. When it comes to immigration, that is the one issue he will get not only pushback, but World War III from his own party, from the Democrats, from the Wall Street Journal, from George Soros. So that's why, I mean, besides the fact that it determines what kind of country we're living in and whether we are living in a country that would elect someone like Barack Obama, who would give away our victory in Iraq, besides this being the most important issue, it's also the one he's going to face the most resistance on and will need the best people for. And when you look back at, start with the first George Bush. This is what I wrote about last week. He even knew how the Democrats were going to undermine him. He said it in his iconic convention speech. He described how the Democrats, Congress, would come to him and say, because he promised no new taxes, and they'll come to me and say, we've got to raise taxes, and I'll say, no new taxes. And they'll come at me again, and I'll say, no new taxes. And they'll come at me again, and I'll say, read my lips, no new taxes. So he knew what was going to happen. He was a great predictor, a great prognosticator. Everything he said came true. But instead of him saying no new taxes, he caved. And that was not only the end of his presidency, but it was incredibly damaging to the Republican Party, because the Democrats had tricked a naive Republican into giving away this signature issue. And so it would be very dangerous, more dangerous than anything facing the Trump administration, if he were manipulated, or as
what do you make of
said, manipulated into giving up the issue of immigration.
What do you think of this effort to undermine? First it was the recount, then it was the Russians hacked, even though there's no new evidence at all, and the FBI and Director of National Intelligence disagree. And I know, because I've interviewed a number of these people, electors being harassed to change their votes away from Trump. What do you make of the effort to delegitimize him?
It's hilarious. And the fake news claims. Then, I open the New York Times and the Washington Post, and they're pushing the fake news about how Russia wanted to elect Trump. I love that idea. Think of all of the gains Russia made with Hillary as Secretary of State. They got 20% of our uranium. They invaded Crimea. Russia has replaced the United States as a leader in the Middle East, and I'm not really against that since they're fighting ISIS, but nonetheless, and but he'd prefer Trump, someone who's described as a lunatic who can be baited into dropping nukes with a tweet. It doesn't make any sense. The FBI disputes it. One of the main proponents of this Russia, I mean, the articles in the New York Times and the Washington Post, they're all anonymous sources from the CIA, an agency we really need to get rid of. Because it is utterly useless and eats up a lot of tax money. We have the worst, and this isn't something I'm bringing up for the first time now. My loyal readers know I have been making fun of U.S. intelligence for a good decade now. We have the worst intelligence collecting in the world.
Hey,
it's worse than Burkina Faso. It's worse than Walmart's intelligence because the Democrats decided to destroy the CIA after Watergate. They said it, they're on the record, they held the hearings, and they did it. So we have no intelligence. The CIA agents sit around reading the Islamabad Post.
Yeah, well, we also know, look at, these are the same people that advanced the narrative without talking to the people that were on the ground in Benghazi, that, oh, it was a spontaneous demonstration and they just happened to have RPGs and mortars in their back pocket and spontaneously decided to attack.
That's right. The one guy who's on the record, who is not in the government right now, is Mike Morrell, who is working for a Hillary-affiliated organization and was involved in the vast and serious Benghazi fake news coming straight out of the administration.
You know, I find this whole thing pretty amazing because it's so obvious to me why this election turned out the way it did. It's so obvious that they're so bitter. The media has now doubled down on stupid. I mean, if you're CNN and last night you're watching the rally, and in the middle of the rally that you're covering, your network, this massive crowd is screaming, CNN sucks. I mean, if you're Jeff Zucker, what are you thinking?
To quote Michelle Obama, I've never been so proud of my country.
For the first time in your adult life?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
No, they are fantastic, these Trump supporters. I'm not shocked at how the election turned out, but I do think the pendulum swings. We do have to be careful to protect the victory that Trump has won, and I think Republicans should always remember that if immigration merely continues, if we don't let in one new immigrant over the next 4 years and run this exact same election, Trump loses. Most of those battleground states were 48-49. Post-1970 immigrants are voting 80% for the Democrats. Immigration isn't just one little issue like pro-life or transgender bathrooms. It is every issue.
This is our final chance. I got to let you go. Ann Coulter, thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good to talk to you, Sean.